From the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg, this is a special edition of Inside Government with Cedric Peterson.
To our audience here at home and around the world, you are now Inside Government. My guests in this special edition of the program are none other than Head of the Collective Prevention Services Department and Epidemiologist of St. Martin, Mrs. Ava Lister de Weaver. I'm also joined by Managing Director of Simpson Bay Pharmacy and representative of the St. Martin Pharmacy Association, Mrs. Tamara Landino. And we also have Managing Director and owner of St. Martin Veterinary Clinic, Dr. Gary Swanston, joining us in this interview, and happy to say that he's joining us from Dominica, allowing us to join him and have him be a part of this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to have you all in this edition of the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning.
And morning to all.
Setting the tone here for our conversation, we're talking about World Antimicrobial Awareness Week 2022. Our experts have been brought in to help weigh on this subject matter because it is one that is very, very serious issue when it comes to public health that needs to be discussed. But to first establish the tone here, I want to start with our epidemiologist, Mrs. Ava Lister de Weaver. Ava, what is World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, and why is St. Martin, or CPS, commemorating it?
Great question. Thank you for that. So I guess before I explain what the week is about and why we are highlighting it, I just wanted to set maybe a bit of background information. So antimicrobial resistance occurs when, for example, bacteria or viruses, fungi, and parasites change over time and no longer respond to medicines, thereby making the infection harder to treat. So for example, when you have a bacteria that becomes resistant to an antibiotic. World Antimicrobial Awareness Week is a World Health Organization initiative, and it is a global campaign celebrated annually in many countries across the world, including St. Martin and the region, to improve awareness and understanding of antimicrobial resistance. And this year, the event falls on November 18th and runs through the 24th of the month with a theme. So every year there is a theme, and this year's theme is Preventing Antimicrobial Resistance Together. And CPS has adapted that theme a little bit, and we are pushing the message of collectively preventing antimicrobial resistance. And AMR is also one of the topics that CPS observes in our annual health observance calendar. And I think AMR has become even more relevant and front-facing, especially post-COVID-19, because globally antimicrobial resistance is becoming prevalent. So all sectors of society need to be responsible when it comes to prescribing and taking antibiotics. And as CPS, being part of health promotion and awareness, we are going out and using platforms such as this to make sure that we bring awareness to the public and healthcare providers to make sure to strengthen our preventive measures and to make sure that everyone is informed and has knowledge about the importance of such a topic.
So antibiotics, which everyone knows, but we don't want to assume that they do. First of all, let's establish the importance. What is antibiotics and how should it be used?
Yeah, for sure. So antibiotics are basically medicines that fight infections that are caused by bacteria. And this can be bacteria in humans and animals. And the antibiotic does so by killing the bacteria or making it difficult for the bacteria to grow and multiply.
So what does it mean?
So when a bacteria becomes resistant to an antibiotic, it means that it's no longer able to counter that infection because it is no longer responding to that antibiotic or to that medication that's been prescribed.
You do the research right now because, of course, the Internet of Things allows anyone who's interested in this topic to do their own personal digging for more information. And you hear topics like superbugs. What is a superbug and how does this affect the whole process of antimicrobial resistance?
Yeah, so I guess the term superbugs gives a positive connotation, but unfortunately, a superbug is actually a strain that is resistant to many different types of antibiotics. So some of the superbugs that maybe the public may be familiar with is something called MRSA, or methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which means that the bacteria Staphylococcus is resistant to an antibiotic called methicillin. So essentially, there are different classes of or different types of superbugs, which pose a challenge for public health and in the healthcare sector in general, because they don't respond to traditional medicines or traditional antibiotics, for example. So the usual drugs that you would have prescribed for someone with with a bacterial infection, they just can't respond to that anymore, because over time, the bacteria or the virus or the fungus has grown and become resistant to it.
One of the key things that you do see and hear as you're doing some research on the topic is that very few people understand the importance of this matter of AMR. Why is it an important issue at this particular stage, seen from a public health perspective?
Absolutely. So from a public health perspective, it is something that globally many countries have focused on for years. And it becomes an important public health issue because when persons who are, susceptible to different bacteria, different infections, you want to make sure that we have the adequate treatment for them. And so when, there are different bugs or different viruses, parasites, becoming resistant to traditional or frontline medications, it is a public health concern because you are constantly having to evolve the course of treatment for persons. And so over time, these bugs do become harder to treat, harder to tackle. And it just makes treating the person and treating the public or the population that much more difficult when you are constantly trying to keep up with, the next bug and trying to make sure that we have the necessary medications, the necessary surveillance from a lab perspective to make sure that we can keep on top of what is actually happening on St. Martin, and to make sure that these superbugs or these antimicrobials don't have an impact in our healthcare sector and in our public.
Now, let's have Tamara as our pharmacist, getting a little bit of an aspect from that side of things. Tamara, can you give us some insight in regard to when someone comes to your pharmacy and they're seeking the necessary prescription? What's important, first and foremost, for citizens to keep in mind when getting prescriptions?
First of all, it's very important to realize that antibiotics can be only prescribed by a doctor, and the pharmacy will not dispense antibiotics without prescription. Many people don't realize it and just come to the pharmacy and ask for antibiotics just to buy it. It's, on St. Martin, not really possible. We pharmacists are very aware of dangers of overuse of antibiotics and misuse for example, viral infections. And this is the reason why we are very selective. Person who comes to the pharmacy and asks for antibiotics is directly asked for the prescription from a doctor. So this is the first important part. The second, it is how people use antibiotics. Antibiotics must be used precisely like prescribed. You cannot take 2 or 3 tablets and stop because you think, oh, I feel better today, I don't need it. No, it doesn't work like this. Antibiotics must be finished. If you have course of antibiotics for 1 week, you must take antibiotics for 1 week. Even if you feel completely okay, it's extremely important. In case of antibiotics, also it's very important to prescribe right doses. Lower is not better in case of antibiotics. In general, it's better to dose very appropriately, so it means right or even slightly higher. This will avoid forming of resistance. Pharmacists are very strict with dosages of antibiotics, and we are checking every prescriptions for right dosages, mostly for children. So this is, I think, very, very important for people to realize that sometimes if they have to wait for prescription a bit longer, it is because we are checking all the dosages. We are sometimes checking how heavy is a child, because this is very important to calculate the right doses. And even if it's not a child, we are really checking. Sometimes we are calling the doctor, we are discussing with the doctor if this is really the best, what has to happen. And this is why prescriptions and communication between pharmacist and doctor are so important in case of antibiotics.
Thank you very much for your input there, Tamara. We're getting to the end of this first segment. I'm going to have the second segment. We're going to get more into the agricultural and animal side of things. And our professional on panel with us is Dr. Gary Swanston, the veterinary specialist that we can speak to concerning that. How does our livestock is affected by AMR? More of this coming up as we continue our conversation with our specialists on AMR right here on Inside Government. Stay with us.
Do you know there is such a thing as teen dating violence? Seriously, there is. When your boyfriend or girlfriend is controlling your every move, trolling you online, checking your social media page, recording you without your permission, or forcing you to do things you don't want to do, this is abuse. If you find yourself in this situation, please talk to someone you can trust. Your parents, school counselor, or the police.
This message has been brought to you by Women's Desk.
Hello, everyone. If you just joined us, I'm having a very insightful conversation with our specialists, Mrs. Ava Lister DeWeaver, our epidemiologist here on St. Martin, and also head of Collective Prevention Services. Also joined by Ms. Tamara Landino, Managing Director of Simpson Bay Pharmacy and a representative of the St. Martin Pharmacy Association, and Dr. Gary Swanston, Managing Director and owner of St. Martin Veterinary Clinic, who is online with us. And I'd like to bring him into this conversation as we're talking about World Antimicrobial Awareness Week 2022 and examine the animal side of things. Dr. Swanston, it's great to have you in the program. Do pets get infections that need to be treated with antibiotics?
I could give you plenty of examples of that, but I'll prefer to start off with something which people don't realize. There's something called One Health, where we have taken the possibilities of connecting human side and the animal side over the last 10 years. Basically, people do not realize that animals, your meat, your chicken, your poultry, your swine, any type of animal, once it starts to be produced in mass, there's always somebody who's going to use antibiotics to boost that growth of the animals. And that has become a problem. There are cited instances where resistance has come from the use of antibiotics in animals. So the vets over the last year have been made aware over and over that antibiotic use in livestock, which you don't do much in St. Martin, but we get most of our beef from the States, from the South America, those places. And their public health are not as strict as sometimes as those in Europe. If I have a choice, I'll quickly use the European FDA, as it's called, than the American FDA, because I find that they're a little on the lax side. So there is antibiotic resistance. You may not realize it. Some of the eggs you eat may have a bit of infection or bacteria that are resistant. your meat that is coming in, the poultry that is coming in, all has to be properly done in a way. Even some people even put it in the feed to boost the production, because it's all about the capitalist side of making money and having your production as high as possible. But the detriment to that is that we have these bugs that are becoming very resistant. I can cite you 2 examples, which are scary for me. One, I have one dog that's almost resistant to everything I could think of, except for one drug, which is not used in dogs, it is used in cattle. So we have to get the pharmacist to tailor it that I can use it in him to see if it works. And this only works on one bug, and he has another bug which has a different antibiotic. So it's like getting 2 antibiotics to do that. But my most scary problem came by about 2 months ago, where, I'm sorry, Ava, but we have been complaining a lot about this, where there is a guy called Jamal Brill. He is acting as if he is a vet. No qualifications. The only thing, he worked with a vet many, many years ago. And to my surprise, the client came in with antibiotics. First of all, like Lando is saying, it's the wrong strength. 2, it's the wrong antibiotic for that treatment of the disease. And it's scary. I know that he could be developing a superbug there by treating these animals. Again, it was only given for 3 days. Whereas we know that the minimum is usually 7 days. Sometimes it's becoming more and more standard that you treat for 10 days. So you're seeing that this is creeping in, and we have to protect our society. People don't realize that the vets are one of the front lines to protect society from these superbugs. And we ourselves are, how you say, mandated. People don't realize we are now being mandated to protect our population. I'll give you one example. There is a certain drug, in fact, 2 drugs I know, that we cannot dispense anymore. In the last 2 years, it's been taken off the market. Enterofloxacin, the fluoroquines. We cannot dispense it in our clinic unless we have done what we call bacterial sensitivity. That is, we take a sample of the disease that we have or the sore that we have, send it to the lab, let them culture it, and tell us what's the best antibiotics are being using. So, as I say, it's scary. I am here trying to protect the population, and there's somebody else out there not knowing all this. Because for me to stay registered, I'm registered in the UK, I'm registered in St. Martin, I have to follow these rules.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swanson. I really wanted to kind of stay on course when it comes to our conversation as it relates to AMR. I want to basically stay on point when it comes to, again, getting specifically related to the infections related to treated with antibiotics as it relates to pets and what people need to know. So we need to share what would be best practices at this particular point. People who are conscientious about their animal welfare and care and will seek your professional input, I would like to take this opportunity to allow you to guide individuals so that they can establish these best practices now with keeping in mind the importance of antimicrobial resistance. So let's try to, I want to just segue here to Ava, just to allow her to respond to the points that were brought up there, because there's some issues that I realized that Dr. Swanson mentioned as it relates to, for example, our food chain being affected by antimicrobial resistance being caused through that. How do we work with the Netherlands and our partnership with the Kingdom in order to ensure that exchange is as safe as possible, seeing that through your eyes as an epidemiologist, Ava?
So I know that there are certain standards, as Dr. Swanson mentioned, but that, I guess, is a bit out of scope for CPS, just because there is the Inspectorate of Health that makes sure to monitor everything that comes in terms of produce, medications. That is done with the Inspector General and his team at the Inspectorate of Health. But as Dr. Swanston mentioned, there are standards, there are for example, for medications, there are licenses that are needed in order to import. And I think the same would be extended to any produce or any food materials that are brought in. Those would definitely go through some sort of inspection and qualifications by Inspectorate of Health.
Things that people should keep in mind when it comes to looking at buying their produce, whether it be meats, dairy. What are the key things that people should be looking for to make sure that they keep themselves safe and healthy?
I think that one of the things what we should really think about is about eating less meat. I don't say to stop eating meat, but just limit so much possible eating meat. Eat not every day, eat 2 times a week. And this already will make difference because less meat means less antibiotics. Anyway, I think also that what is important, there is more and more opportunities to buy meat what is antibiotic free. For example, I look at the labels in a shop and I check if I can buy meat what is listed like antibiotic free. I buy this one. It is more expensive, but if you don't eat everyday meat, you can afford it. And I think that this is one of the really, really important issues and problems. We overuse not only antibiotics, but also eating meat. So this is one of the possibilities, in my opinion, how we could tackle this problem.
Dr. Swanson, your input?
Rightfully so. I would choose animal products that are claimed to be antibiotic free. I would also go for local production of eggs and even meat, because I know that the feed that comes in for these animals are usually antibiotic free. And these farmers that are using it are not the type that would be putting antibiotics into their feeds because of the level of their production. And also they usually come to the vets for advice. And when we do give them antibiotics, we are very specific about how they use it, how long they use it for, and the time that they are not supposed to be, how you're saying, harvest the eggs. They may spoil a bit, but we have convinced them. They get a proper education on animal resistance and why we are doing it, and to maintain their production.
Ava, your input on that aspect as well.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention exactly what Tamara said, is just being a more conscious shopper when you are looking to purchase meats. And as Tamara mentioned, just looking at the label, sure, there might be that extra cost involved, but making sure that if you can afford to just look at the labels and make sure that you are choosing poultry or any meats that have not been, that have come from antibiotic-free slaughterhouses.
And I would like to end off here because we are definitely running out of time here. But I want to paint a picture for the general public to walk away from this conversation understanding the role they have to play. Ava, what does the citizen need to understand in order to protect themselves? Because we're looking at a time frame here where professionals around the world are saying that this antimicrobial resistance is a threat to modern medicine overall. So what is the role of the citizen that they must play at this point to ensure that we do not find a future where we find ourselves in a situation where we can't treat ourselves when it comes to viruses and bacteria? What can we do today?
Absolutely. So I think, as we, mentioned earlier in the program, is to make sure that when you do go to the doctor, when you do go to the pharmacy, to really ask those questions when you are prescribed an antimicrobial, and to make sure that you are using it as prescribed and using it through the full course as your physician and as the pharmacy indicated to do so. And just being being more aware, being more in tune to why you're taking what you've been prescribed by your doctor, and have those conversations. And I just wanted to briefly mention that through this awareness week and through this campaign, CPS has also launched a confidential public survey that we have distributed to members of the public and healthcare providers, because we want to gauge what our public knows about antimicrobial awareness, what questions they may have. And with that information, it will help to inform how we want to push out future messaging for making sure that people are knowledgeable and are aware about antimicrobial resistance and all of the festivities around Antimicrobial Awareness Week.
And we, of course, invite our general public and audience to get more information from our official government sources of information, the government website, our Facebook page. Final words as we're closing out the program here, starting with you, Dr. Swanston, that you can share with the general public as it relates to antimicrobial resistance, and of course this awareness week that's observed from the 18th of November to the 24th. What would you say?
I would like just to make sure that the clients, especially those with the animals, follow the directions given to them when given antibiotics. Finish the use of the antibiotics. Don't say the animal feeling well, he's eating. And also, most times we ask them to come back to recheck to make sure that to make sure that the animal is well and there's no additional problems. Instructions are very put there for your benefit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swanston. Mrs. Tamara Landino, can you share with us your final words?
Don't see antibiotics as the first resource, but a last resource. It means don't ask a doctor to prescribe it because you feel bad, because you will want to have quick fix. Let doctor decide that it's really very important that you use antibiotics and use it only for bacterial infections, not for common flu of colds, because they are virus-induced. Antibiotics should be used precisely like prescribed, never left over and not shared with other people.
Thank you very much, Ms. Landino, for that. And Mrs. Abelista de Weaver, your final words.
I just wanted to thank you, Cedric. You have always been a partner in making sure that CPS gets our messaging across. And to Dr. Swanston and Tamara Landino, thank you very much for your partnership in helping us to promote this Awareness Week. I also wanted to thank other stakeholders that we are working with, such as the Medical Center, St. Martin Laboratory Services, USM, AUC, and the local pharmacies and physicians, and of course, DCOM, because without your support, we would not be able to carry our message as together as one to the public. And just to remind the public to, as you mentioned, Cedric, keep informed on our government Facebook and government website. We are hosting several information sessions, one for the public on November 24th, which will take place at the University of St. Martin at 7 p.m. We will have a panel discussion, hopefully with, members that are on the call today, but to invite everyone to just come and ask questions and to get information to be able to make sure that you are taking the necessary precautions, that you're more knowledgeable, and that you ask any questions that you may have to the panelists.
I want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of this discussion. We really need more time to get more into the depth of knowledge that each of you possess. And we look forward to having future conversations with you. So thank you so much for being a part of this edition of the program. And to our radio listeners, television viewers, thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of this edition of Inside Government. If you've missed my broadcast of this conversation with these panel of specialists, be sure to log on for video on demand at the official government website, that's stmartingov.org, the Facebook page of St. Martin, Government of St. Martin, that's facebook.com/SXMGOV. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Government of St. Martin. And for audio playback, stay tuned to St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM throughout the course of the day, especially during Antimicrobial Resistance and Awareness Week for the month of November from the 18th to the 24th. On behalf of my colleagues down at the Department of Collective Prevention Services under the Ministry of Public Health, Social Development, and Labor, and all of us here at the Department of Communication, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thanks so much for tuning in.